Hello and welcome to the Riyal Deal, coming to you from the Al Arabiya English headquarters. This is your weekly bulletin, bringing you all the latest business news headlines and analysis from Saudi Arabia. Coming up, 9 years into Vision 2030 and less than 5 years off from the year 2030 itself, we get the latest on Saudi Arabia's progress towards achieving the vision's goals. Plus, we'll have the latest GDP figures for Q1. With tourism and travel key pillars of Vision 2030, we speak to the CEO of the all-new Riyadh Air, and we speak to the IMF Middle East Director to discuss the impact of non-oil revenue streams. Plus, we'll be finding out more about the appeal of the old and the new in Jeddah, which is going to be home to a new Trump Tower and which is home to the historic Al-Balad Old Town, which is drawing visitors like never before. Hello and welcome. We're going to begin with the latest GDP figures, which have been announced by the Saudi government, which show that Saudi Arabia's economy grew 2.7% year on year in the first quarter. Well, in line with Vision 2030 and the kingdom's push to diversify away from hydrocarbons, a key factor behind that growth figure is activity in the non-oil sector. Well, non-oil activity increased by 4.2% in Q1. Well, last week, the kingdom released its annual report detailing the progress towards achieving the vision's goals last year. Well, launched more than 9 years ago, the long-term ambition for the vision is to develop key public service sectors such as health, education, infrastructure, recreation and tourism. Well, at the launch of this report, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said that 9 years into Vision 2030, the leaders stand proud of the Saudi people for their accomplishments, having turned ambition into action and goals into milestones. Well, the Crown Prince also says that looking ahead, the resolve is stronger than ever. The kingdom will accelerate delivery, embrace every opportunity and further elevate its position as a global leader. Well, let's bring in Ali Raza, the Chief Investment Officer of the Saudi Arabia Holding Company. Ali, a very warm welcome to the programme. We're 9 years into Vision 2030. We're less than 5 years away from the year 2030 itself. What struck you about this latest government progress report?
Tom, the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, famously said a few years ago that I will not rest until I see the Gulf become the new Europe of the world. The strategic pillars on which Vision 2030 is built are a vibrant society, a thriving economy, and an ambitious nation. And indicators aside for a moment, if the energy on the ground is any indication of how the nation is progressing and how the economic strategy is developing, I think all things are pointing towards a positive direction. Now, more specifically, over 90% of the indicators that were targeted for 2024 have been met. And this is what the Vision 2030 Initiative Progress Report reported earlier this week, which is, with a few years to go, naturally, there are some challenges still underway. For example, the FDI numbers were a little bit lower in 2024 compared to 23. Saudi Arabia would like to see $100 billion in annual FDI by the year 2030, and is currently at $20 billion. However, if we look at the macro of what's taking place, the reality is that there are some aspects of the strategy which are perhaps not yet yielding the complete results, but many other areas which are leading indicators to a positive future. And I think all in all, that's what the Vision 2030 Progress Report showed us earlier this week.
Ali, some of the numbers that stuck out for me were the number of employees, for example, in small and medium enterprises, reaching 7.8 million people during the course of the year 2024. That's up from 4.7 million 4 or 5 years ago. So that's on track. And it goes some way, doesn't it, towards explaining why the unemployment rate in Saudi Arabia is at a historic low level.
Well, there's multiple reasons for that, but perhaps one of the most interesting ones is the fact that one of the metrics reported earlier this week was the female participation rate, the female employment participation rate of 30%, which was targeted for 2030, has already been met. there has been a drastic increase in female employment participation rate. This is not to discount the work that's taking place across broader industrial development initiatives. On top of that, there are studies that show that 1 in 3 people under the age of 65 have an interest in starting a small business. And I think what's taking place is, first of all, a generally greater rate of people participating in employment, and the female segment being one of them, but also an evolving culture, a changing culture towards SME enterprises and a general entrepreneurial spirit across the region.
Well, we're going to continue our focus on the Saudi economy now and turn our attention to the International Monetary Fund's forecast for the Middle East and specifically for Saudi Arabia. Well, the IMF has just released an economic outlook report highlighting the challenges faced by the region. Well, these challenges, according to that report, include trade tensions, conflict, and climate shocks. Well, to talk us through that report and its findings, we're joined by Dr. Jihad Azour, the Director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department at the International Monetary Fund. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Dr. Azour. You also served as Lebanon's finance minister during the years 2005 to 2008. Real GDP growth in Saudi Arabia projected to rise steadily throughout the course of 2026 as well. What's behind the growth?
Well, what is behind the growth? First is the performance of the non-oil sector. Over the last few years, the diversification strategy in Saudi, with the development of certain number of reforms, has led to steady, stable growth in the non-oil sector. In 2021-22, Saudi was the highest growing economy in the G20, thanks to the effort of diversification. In 2025 and 26, the increase in oil production, because of the latest agreement of the OPEC Plus, will also grow the oil sector. Of course, this acceleration of production will be less than what was expected in December. This is why we had to revise downward our projections for this year and next because of this decision.
So Saudi's efforts to diversify and boost non-oil growth, I mean, how do you rate the performance overall?
Well, over the last few years, certain number of reforms have helped Saudi not only to grow the economy, but also to reduce unemployment. Unemployment is at the lowest level in decades, especially at the youth level. Women's participation in the economy increased from 14 to 34% in 5 years. And this is despite the various shocks, COVID, the inflation shock, the uncertainty that we are living through. Therefore, Saudi economy is vibrant, dynamic, and reforms have been very much impacting positively the outcome of the economy. Of course, the oil sector is still an important component of the economy, but the development of the non-oil sector, the development of certain number of new activities are helping the economy to diversify not only the GDP, but also the state revenues.
And what sort of a rate would you think we might see personal income tax?
I think those are issues that will be part of the fiscal strategy, both in terms of rates, tranches, and timing.
Obviously, we've seen Saudi Arabia's economy affected by the extension of the OPEC Plus voluntary oil production cuts. How's that affected oil-related growth?
Well, the OPEC Plus agreement in the past few years led to additional voluntary cuts in production and in export. And Saudi was the largest contributor. Recently, in December, the agreement of this group is to gradually increase export, which in itself will increase the GDP of Saudi. Yet the softening of oil price since the last few weeks will reduce this expansion. Yet this will contribute to the recovery of the oil sector and the recovery of the overall Saudi economy in 2025. What does it mean? It means that revenues will grow and also external resources will increase.
Are we seeing increased private consumption and investment in the kingdom, would you say?
Yes, we see an economy that is becoming more growing because of local demand, and demand is consumption as well as also investment. Saudi is running one of the largest investment program in the region, but also consumption is growing in a certain number of activities, including certain service sectors like tourism, hospitalities, and others, which is why the economy is growing at steady state.
And inflation looking pretty stable?
Inflation is pretty stable. I would say this is the case in most of the GCC economies. And part of it is due to the fact that there are still certain level of subsidies that are helping to reduce the volatility of oil, of prices in the economy.
One of the things the report points to is the substantial, it says, foreign direct investment that Saudi Arabia has attracted. How has Saudi Arabia done that? How has it attracted that investment?
Well, Saudi is the largest economy in the region and has embarked in a large investment program. Some of this program is to increase the capacity of the economy to produce. Some of it also is to develop certain number of new sectors. This is why Saudi is an economy that is growing at a healthy rate, economy that is large, the only economy that is part of the G20. And recently with the Vision 2030, we saw a certain number of sectors, activities that are now being growing in the economy, which attracted FDIs.
Such as?
Well, you have in several sectors, technology is one, renewable is another one. You have a massive investment in hospitality, cultural, as well as also touristic activities. All these activities led to increase in investment from abroad.
The report focuses quite considerably on global uncertainty, which is a reality for the entire planet, as those words suggest. Of all the countries in the region, though, how robust would you say Saudi Arabia is looking in the context of that uncertainty?
Well, the uncertainty is affecting all countries in the world. And in fact, uncertainty usually has a negative impact on growth. This is why we revised downward our growth projections. Yet, compared to other parts of the world, the region is still growing in 2025. 2026, in the case of Saudi, we project growth at 3% this year and 3.7% in 2026. This is compared to other comparable countries in the G20, it's a good performance. Yet, uncertainty has negative impact on growth. On average, it could reduce growth by 2.5%. And in this outlook this year, we are studying the impact in the medium term. And if uncertainty stays for a longer period, for example, for 2 years, it could have a negative impact on growth of 4.5%. This is why we recommend countries to be very vigilant, increase buffers in order to reduce any negative impact on the stability of the economy, and also accelerate transformation by investing in the future, developing productivity, and reduce any risk for being subjected to external shocks.
And the word uncertainty, just to sort of dig a little bit deeper on that word, what are you getting at? You're basically talking about tariffs, aren't you? Is there anything else?
No, uncertainty is every or anything that could negatively affect your economy that you cannot measure. This is the difference between risk and uncertainty. Risk is something that you can assess, you can measure, and you can mitigate. Uncertainty, you know that things may not go in the right direction, but it's very difficult for you to quantify, assess, and find the right measures to mitigate it.
Okay. And when you look at the sort of the geopolitical situation across the whole region,
yes,
doesn't it make Saudi Arabia's ongoing efforts to diversify away from oil dependence, doesn't make that look all the more prudent by way of a path forward?
Of course. On one hand, this will allow the Saudi economy to be less dependent on the volatility of oil price. And we are seeing now a softening of the oil price. But also, the Saudi economy is becoming much more complex, i.e. much more sophisticated. And this will allow the economy to be more competitive. Of course, Saudi is the largest economy in the region, but it is getting now more and more connected globally. We see this with the increase in FDI, for example. We see this in the development of certain fast-growing sectors around technology, AI, renewable energies, and things of the like, that put Saudi now more into being competitive with advanced economies.
Okay, and then perhaps that explains briefly why you've decided to establish your regional office in Riyadh.
Well, of course, Saudi, in addition to the size of the economy, it's a very active country globally. The chair of the IMFC, which is the body that overlooks the work of the fund, is the Saudi Minister of Finance. And Saudi is becoming one of the magnets that is attracting not only investment, but also policymakers to discuss economic financial issues. Recently, in February, we had an international conference in Al-Balad, in this beautiful site, whereby we gathered leading ministers, governors of central bank from emerging economies with high-level scholars to discuss the global challenges and to increase coordination between emerging market decision makers. This is the recognition of the regional and international role that Saudi is playing now.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us.
Me.
Dr. Jihad Azour, Director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department of the International Monetary Fund. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Let's bring Ali Raza back into the conversation. Ali, as we just heard there from the IMF Middle East Director, inflation is steady, employment is at a historically low level. We heard about the importance of non-oil revenue growth. So that IMF report and that interview really seemed to echo what we were talking about earlier on, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So, there's varied opinions across the world and various bodies conducting a number of studies. But once again, I think the major item in question in the national strategy here has been perhaps the level of FDI inflows, right, which are a little bit short of the 100 billion targeted annually by 2030. But if you look at all of the economic indicators that can be reasonably assumed to be leading indicators of future success and prosperity, low on inflation, growth in non-oil revenue, very low, historically very low unemployment, which in turn creates a significant disposable income. Home ownership rates are rising drastically. In fact, just last week, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, contributed up to 1 billion Saudi Riyal of his own funds to support home ownership in the region. I mean, this, amongst just many of the indicators, I believe are the best examples of leading indicators, and I think the IMF is mirroring that as well. They share that sentiment.
Okay, Ali, thanks a lot for that. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Let's take a look now at some aviation news stories from Saudi Arabia. The low-cost carrier Flynas increased capacity by 63% during the years 2019 to 2024, making it the fastest-growing airline in the Middle East. That's according to the British global travel data provider OAG. Well, the airline says it will begin operating more than 160 aircraft by 2030. In what's seen as a significant development in aviation policy, Saudi Arabia has opened domestic airspace to foreign charter operators. Well, this change means that international charter flights can now operate between 2 points within the kingdom. Let's hope that this will boost both business and private travel. And with a view to boosting its brand visibility, Riyadh Air, known by its two-letter IATA code RX, has signed 11 MOUs with a range of sales and distribution service providers. Well, the airline says these partnerships will solidify its presence and expand its footprint in international markets. Well, ticket sales are due to begin this summer. So, Riyadh Air, we were just talking about there, due to take to the skies later on this year. Well, we caught up with the Riyadh Air CEO, Tony Douglas. When are we going to see the first Riyadh Air plane take off with some passengers on board?
So this is super exciting. This has been nearly 3 years in the making up to now. And by the end of this year, we want to be up in the skies. But if I quickly recap the story to date, March of 2023, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince decrees the establishment of the new national carrier. Shortly after that, we announced our first aircraft order, 72 Boeing 787 Dreamliners. At the Paris Air Show that year, we revealed our first livery, and it was designed to proudly stand out in the crowd, elegance, refinement, and to make a very positive statement of what we were all about. In November, in Dubai Air Show that year, second livery. People said, 2 liveries, why? And of course we said, because we can. But the reality was it was about making that statement of being proud to present a full service carrier that stands out for refinement, elegance and grace. Followed then in 2024, Paris Fashion Week, never been done before, cabin crew fashion. And that kind of connection to TWA, Pan Am, DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can with a real modern twist. When they walk through the terminals, they stand out in the crowd. It's refinement, it's grace, it's elegance. And at the Jeddah Grand Prix, it was the big cabin reveal. And of course, that was the third one in the trilogy. Incredible. We'll be serving in the skies at the end of this year.
Well, many congratulations. Sounds like you've had a very busy few years, Tony. There will be people asking, you know, Saudi Arabia's got a flag carrier already, Saudi, it's out there, we see it on the tarmac. What's the rationale behind a second national carrier?
So the kingdom is obviously a very large country. It's got a big population, and it's of course a G20 economy. The reality is we're not as well connected today internationally as we need to be, and there is a clear case for 2 long-haul national carriers. When we mature up to scale, obviously our hub, given the brand, will be Riyadh, connecting to the world, and the world through Riyadh into the kingdom and beyond. And Saudi will move over time to Jeddah, which is the ancestral home as well. So both those markets need growth. Saudi, the sister company, and Riyadh Air. And I think this is one of those really important moments in the evolution of aviation within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Wow. And you're going to be serving 100 cities by the year 2030. I mean, that's a huge ambition. What's the plan? You'd open perhaps the short-haul routes first and perhaps move on to long-haul from there? Is there a sort of a rollout plan? Are you able to tell us anything about that?
Well, obviously, I can only tease at the moment the cities in question because we're going to be moving into our ticket selling window towards the summer. But before then, what I can say is it's actually going to be a number of the longer haul ones first. And the reason for that, Tom, is we're actually taking Boeing 787 as our first deliveries. So I use this illustratively. We're likely to operate from capital cities, let's say in northwestern Europe, into Riyadh, and then to get the utilisation out the aircraft after a turnaround time there, we'll operate on a shorter sector. So the likes of Jeddah, the likes of Dubai, and many others where there's lots of demand to make sure that those aircraft are put to work well, but importantly, we can give incredible Riyadh Air service to our guests.
Just to recap for the benefit of our viewers, it's going to be a mix of Airbus and Boeing planes, 60 Airbus A320 Neos, 39 Boeing 787 Dreamliners, more than 33 more then to come. That's a total of 132 aircraft. Are they going to be delivered on time?
So 132 aircraft, correct. The scoop is as follows. We're currently engaged in an extra wide-body campaign as well. And we hope by the summer, we'll actually announce the 3rd aircraft in our fleet. So we'll be a 3-horse stable, so to speak, 321, 60, tick, 787 Dreamliner, 72, tick, and in the summer, an extra wide-body aircraft. It goes without saying, as a start-up, we are beholden on Boeing to deliver on time. And that's, of course, easier said than done. Both Boeing and Airbus have had a number of challenges with their supply chain, and there have been revisions last year to the delivery commitments. But the reason why we've now revealed the cabin proposition is because our aircraft are now running down the production lines in South Carolina, in Charleston, which is where Boeing assemble the 787 Dreamliner. So the fact that we can go and physically stand inside fuselages, our seat manufacturers are now producing, I can go and sit in those seats, is what gives us confidence we're in the home straight.
Probably ups the pressure a little bit on everyone who's on that production line as well. How long does it take? You're obviously a veteran of this industry, having been at Etihad before. How long do you think it takes for a brand new airline, starting like yours, from a blank piece of paper, to the point that it becomes profitable?
So up to now, this has been 3 years in the making plus. So the complexity around everything you have to stand up from a blank sheet of paper, it's super exciting, Tom. Incredible. Of course, the gift we have above all else is no legacy. So we're not held back by old-fashioned systems that were there for good reason, but are no longer as agile as the way in which the travelling public want to interact with their airlines today. So what we've been able to do is design the airline for the future, a digital airline for the future. And that's therefore got a lot more in common with the way in which you would go online and order through the likes of a noon.com or an amazon.com, where you're actually curating your experience and adding it to a shopping basket and then transacting similar to what you do with Apple Pay. But of course, if you or anybody who's watching this has ever tried to get a ticket refund from an airline, we all know how long sometimes that can take. And it's because the systems were designed pretty much for one-way traffic originally. If it's noon.com or it's Amazon and you want to return a product, you almost get a refund instantly. And of course, that's one of many examples of how you bring modern digital to the world of commercial aviation. And when you're a startup, that's the gift you have, no legacy. We're going to do something really special in how we allow the travelling public to engage with us in that way.
And you're launching at a time when everyone's talking about AI. You probably get asked this a lot, but I'm trying to imagine there must be scope, isn't there, for using AI and possibly in those booking systems you mentioned, but in other ways as well, perhaps with yield management, perhaps with pricing models. Are you seeing room for the use of AI in basically how RX is managed?
So massively so. We've been working with some super innovative boutique digital organisations, and it's how you bring technology that's available today that uses AI into curating experiences. So if we think about the world of the concierge, if one goes to a hotel concierge and asks a question, that gives the concierge context. So if I go and I ask, where is there an incredible Italian restaurant? The concierge now knows I want to dine. But what a good concierge will do is say, well, here's my recommendation, but also there's a theatre around the corner and there's a remarkable stage show on it. And if I show interest in both the restaurant and the theatre, he might then say, and also there's a late night spot after the theatre finishes. So he's curating the optionality, the proposition of an experience. Now, what we're going to use AI for is exactly that. If you put, let's say, a Riyadh into the shopping basket from an international city with Riyadh Air, because it has the date and the destination, that's context. What the AI concierge will do is then say, it's Riyadh season. Here's all the following experiences that are available at that point in time. And if you want to add them to the shopping basket, you can do. If you want to put your whole family into the one order, as opposed to everybody has to do it separately, you can do. If one of the family members then changes his or her mind later on, you can take them out of the order and you get an instant credit, just like you would do with Amazon or with noon.com. Modern technology, the world of commercial aviation. It's the next big step.
Yeah, it sounds like you're launching at exactly the right moment. Just talking about tech, and in terms of the passenger's experience, we've seen some press releases about the new product, the seats in all 4 classes, because there's going to be first, business, premium economy, and economy, if my memory serves me correctly. One of the things that really struck me is that sound system in flight. I think it's in business class, where, and possibly in first as well, where people won't hear the music or the film soundtrack of what's happening beside them, but they won't need a headset either. How does that work?
Well, I'm glad you described it the way you did, Tom, because you described first class, and that's what everybody thought when it was our reveal. The front row's actually our business elite, and we've deliberately tried to raise the bar in each of our product offerings almost to the next level. So our business elite and our business seats, there's 28 in total in the premium cabin, all have privacy doors. They all have unique suites with our canopy twist over the top. So this unique piece of design signature, which is symbolic of the Bedouin tent when it's pegged at either side, how it goes taut, and it presents a canopy twist, the canopy of the roof. That's your personal space. Inside, at the business elite end, 32-inch super high definition 4K OLED screens. But the point you referred to, it has a system built into all the headrests. It's actually called Euphony, and it uses an incredible French sound technology produced by a company called DVLet. And what that allows is hi-fi standard experience, but the clever bit is it's zonal. So you can't hear what I'm listening to on the seat next to you, and I can't hear what you're listening to. You could be streaming it from Spotify, from your personal device. You could be listening to in-flight entertainment experience, or you could be streaming from your device onto that 4K stream as well. So next generation of 38,000 feet entertainment.
It's come a long way, hasn't it, since those rubber tubes that they used to have in the sort of the 70s and 80s on planes for listening to music. What do you think is going to be the thing that stands out for the passenger? What's going to be the big wow for a passenger who flies on Riyadh Air?
So I think there's a combination of things. I go back to when we first presented those liveries. A number of people commented, this looks more like a billionaire's G650 private jet stretched. And we did that on purpose. Again, that elegance, that grace, that style. When we presented our cabin crew fashion, people said this is bringing that whole kind of beauty back to the joy that we remember in how in the bygone days, the halcyon days of travel, people used to enjoy that experience. With the cabin that we presented at the Jeddah Grand Prix, one of the headlines was the Audrey Hepburn of the sky. And guess what? That's what we were trying to do. Glamour, grace, refinement, bringing incredible online service. We're in the hospitality business, but the digital twist to how that curates, we believe, will take it to the next level. And of course, the brand is Riyadh, the brand is Riyadh, the brand is Riyadh, Tom.
It's good for Riyadh, isn't it? Because obviously Riyadh is becoming, a major global hub, and I'm assuming the additional traffic, the additional visibility of Riyadh, thanks in no small part to Riyadh Air, is a big plus point from this project.
So hospitality in the kingdom is world famous. The idea of hafawa, the warm welcome, the way in which people go out their way to make you feel very, very comfortable in our home. Well, of course, that journey in the future will start from over 100 different international cities. And the first thing you'll see probably on the tarmac, maybe if it's Shanghai, it might be in JFK, it might be London Heathrow, you'll see that livery. The minute you see it, the brand is Riyadh, hafawa, we can't wait to serve.
There's a lot of talk in the media about how pilots are in short supply globally. I mean, I don't know if you think that sort of reporting is exaggerated, or whether indeed you have found that recruiting pilots is challenging.
So I think it's an accurate statement. Certainly pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, there's been skills challenges in a number of areas, pilots, but if you go back to Boeing and Airbus and many of the other aerospace members of the supply chain, part of their challenge was a skills drain. But the thing that's been truly exceptional, and I have to say, in all honesty, a real surprise for us, is over the last 2 years, since we introduced Riyadh.com, we have a careers page on there, and it allows people who want to apply to be pilots, cabin crew, engineers, technicians and such like, to put all their personal details and certifications in. Up to now, we've had 1.4 million people apply for consideration to join the Riyadh family, 146 different nationalities, and I have to say we're humbled by that response, and there's some incredible talent in there.
So a lot of different nationalities, as you say, 146 of them. I mean, another sort of classic recruiting ground for pilots is the Air Force. Obviously, Saudi Arabia has the Royal Saudi Air Force. Is that somewhere you can recruit from? Are you planning a cadet program, for example, for pilots, where you train them up and perhaps groom up some domestic talent? Or are you having to find yourself coming up with pretty aggressive packages to lure pilots away from other airlines? What's your approach?
So it's a combination of a number of the things you've mentioned. So to start off with, you're absolutely spot on. The Kingdom has an extremely competent Air Force. It's an Air Force of scale, and of course that is a clear source of opportunity for people who are transitioning from a service life from the military into commercial aviation. But even at this early stage, what we've also done is established our own cadet program. We're currently in the process of constructing our own pilot training school. And it's not just about pilot training in isolation. We've started the first female Saudi aviation technician training course. It's a 3-year program, over 3,000 applicants for the first 30 places. And of course, we'll do that every year. So from grassroots, building up with our pilots to date, what we call our CADA pilots, we've deliberately recruited from a real cross-section, everything from senior test pilots from Boeing, as well as many different airlines, because we want to create the Riyadh Air culture, not import somebody else's culture.
What do you think is going to be the one metric you really keep your eye on after the launch of this airline? The one thing that you'll be saying, this determines whether or not RX, Riyadh Air, is on the right tracks or not?
So there's a number of them. I think we all acknowledge that. But for me, the top of that hierarchy is guest experience, the smile factor, how you made me feel. That's what the hospitality business is all about, because the examples I used before, the best, the most beautiful liveries, tick. The best cabin crew fashion, tick. The best in-cabin experience, tick. But it's all about people. You can have all of those things, and if it's not in your culture, it's not in your values and your ethos to have empathy and to serve and to really demonstrate how we connect with the guests, then the best physical assets in the world won't win it alone. So that's the top of the hierarchy of needs, guest experience. But it goes without saying as well, we want to be financially sustainable, and therefore how we make sure as a business this is run in tidy order to make sure we're in control of all the details. Because the old joke, the old cliche in commercial aviation, which you'll have heard many times before, if you want to end up as a multi-millionaire, start off as a multi-billionaire and buy an airline. Because you can lose money if you're not over the details in our line of business, and many do. Part of Riyadh Air's business plan is to be financially sustainable and to be profitable for our shareholder, PIF.
Just lastly, we're all very focused on Vision 2030, which is less than 5 years from now. But let's push the timeline forwards beyond that, where do you see Riyadh Air in 10 years from now in terms of size, in terms of network, in terms of reputation?
So it's a great question. In our line of business, it's by definition a long-term business. So you have to quite often think on a 30-year horizon, work back to 20, work back to 10, work back to 5 to today. 5 years in our line of business is almost what the order waiting list is with the likes of Boeing and Airbus. So you could place an order and almost have to wait for most of that till you take your first delivery. So in 10 years' time, we will, of course, seen the FIFA World Cup in 2034 in Riyadh. Obviously, 2030 Expo. It is already a hub for global entertainment, attractions, culture and heritage across the whole of the kingdom. In order to give people the access that they want to enjoy those experiences, as well as connecting Saudi nationals to the world, it needs a super connecting, world-class, full-service airline. In short, the Kingdom's Emirates, the Kingdom's Qatar Airways, but bigger and better.
All right, well, we wish you all the very best with achieving those extremely ambitious goals. Thank you so much, Tony Douglas, the CEO of Riyadh Air. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Ali, let's bring you back into the conversation. We were just listening to the CEO of Riyadh Air, Tony Douglas, speaking there. What really stood out for me while talking to him is just the speed and the scale of this rollout.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I had the privilege of visiting the Riyadh Air offices when they were still in the first place. And the first thought I had stepping inside was, wow, this is truly a startup environment, but perhaps one of the world's most well-funded startups. The energy is absolutely off the charts. Riyadh Air has a world-class team in place. Tony Douglas is doing fantastic things, but he's accompanied by similarly expert professionals, Adam Bukadira, some other individuals who built Etihad Airways together from a loss-making airline to a very profitable airline. Pedigree, across the team of thousands of people that are doing incredible things. I think, the Riyadh Air is just yet another example of the brilliance also, if we expand this out a little bit, of the strategy that's underway by not just the PIF, but many of the entities and the national agenda around Saudi Arabia. Earlier this year, Saudi Arabia, the PIF, finalized their stake in Heathrow Airport of around 15%. Now, looking at aviation across the board, if we look at the value chain, from aircrafts to infrastructure to services to technology, materials, there are a number of investments and initiatives underway which indicate that there is a broader or further reaching strategy in place. But, looking at this particular investment now, how I think about it is there is an ambition in the region to build aviation as an industry, build over $150 billion worth of additions to and a new airport infrastructure. What better way to learn than to be a partner to and a supporter of one of the world's busiest and largest airports, Heathrow Airport. So, this is just yet one indication of, in my opinion, the brilliance of the strategic minds that are at the helm of these initiatives and responsible for building out this industry across the kingdom.
Okay, Ali, let's stay with that aviation thread and shift our attention to Avilease, which is another PIF-owned entity. It's a leasing company. A bit of an update on their financing. What have you got for us?
So, Tom, just recently, Avilease was given an upgrade by Fitch and Moody's. They were given investment-grade ratings, which has drastically improved their investment proposition. They've been raising several rounds or securing several revolving facilities with the help of PIF and other financiers. Avilease has a desire and intention to become one of the top 10 aircraft lessors in the world. And it's another PIF entity, which, in my opinion, again, is very strategically placed and very intuitively developed. being at the helm of an aircraft lessor and one of the top 10 aircraft lessors in the world, which I believe they're on track to become, this gives you a certain negotiating power, certain strategic profile. It gives you certain flexibility and an approach to be dynamic in the development of our own airlines and industries, such as Saudi, Riyadh Air, Flynas, and the likes. The stage that it's gotten to already, given the fact that it was only started in 2022, only a few short years, the progress that Aviation has made already is significant, and they're beginning to pick up relationships with tier one airlines and expand the footprint across the globe. There's even been talks of an IPO, which I would be very interested to see a little bit further down the line. But once again, just yet another stroke of brilliance, in my opinion, in a strategy that's being developed to build an entire industry from scratch.
Okay, thanks for that, Ali. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Let's take a look at some other stories making the headlines. In a joint statement, Saudi Arabia and Qatar said that they will pay Syria's outstanding debt to the World Bank. Well, that debt totals close to $15 million, and it's hoped that this repayment is going to pave the way for a broader international effort aimed at helping the war-torn country to recover and rebuild. The Bank of New York Mellon, BNY, says it has received a license to set up its regional headquarters in Saudi Arabia. This follows announcements in recent months by both Goldman Sachs and Citigroup to establish regional HQs in Riyadh. And the Trump Organization, which is run by the US president's children, has a variety of projects across the region, amongst them plans for a Trump Tower in Riyadh and in Jeddah. Well, Eric Trump says that demand for units in the Jeddah Tower have been, quote, incredible.
We're operating at an incredibly high level already in the region. And if sales are any indication, just in Jeddah alone, our building's over 85% sold out at incredible numbers. People love who we are as a family. They love who he is. They love our brand.
Eric Trump, the executive vice president of the Trump Organization, speaking there about strong sales in the Trump Tower in Jeddah. Well, that Red Sea port city has also been in recent global headlines for hosting the Grand Prix. But as well as being a modern commercial hub, Jeddah has a newly restored historic old town. Well, known simply as Al-Balad, the town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's proving to be a big hit with visitors who are exploring the centuries-old streets like never before.
We are having a lot of numbers going on, and Saudi Arabia is open now for tourism, and the country has, as I said before, so many different architecture heritage in Saudi Arabia.
And that was the director of Jeddah's historic district, Sami Nawar, speaking there. Ali, let's bring you back into the conversation, because whichever Jeddah you go to, the old one or the new one, you've got this renovated historic quarter, which is called Al-Balad, dating back to the 7th century. Then you've got these ultra-modern projects like the Trump Tower. I mean, it really puts Jeddah on the map, doesn't it? And it goes a long way to supporting that goal of having 150 million tourists a year by the year 2030.
Jeddah is a very important city, of course, with a lot of historical relevance and a lot of current and future relevance. And the Saudi approach to development has been from the get-go, let's build for the future, but let's not forget our heritage. And if we look at even the report that was issued earlier this week, there were references and highlights of the number of UNESCO-listed heritage sites. And Tom, recently we spoke to Jerry Inzerillo at Diriyah, which is yet another example of a very historically relevant part of Saudi Arabia, home of Saudi Arabia, where the approach has been to maintain the heritage-listed site, but not transform it, to maintain the integrity of it. And I think in Jeddah, the intention will be to maintain as much of the heritage as possible whilst allowing it to flourish for the future.
Okay, a very big thank you to Ali Raza there. Always a pleasure talking to you. That is it for this edition of The Riyal Deal. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again next week.